Day 5. We are thrilled to introduce our distinguished speaker for tonight, Attorney Rosell Abenir. Attorney Rosell is an Assessment Revenue Officer at the Bureau of Internal Revenue RDO 081 in Cebu City North. With a robust background as a CPA lawyer, she brings a wealth of expertise in taxation, management advisory services, and regulatory compliance. Attorney Rosell's extensive knowledge and experience make her a highly respected figure in her field. Her insights and guidance have been invaluable to many, and we are fortunate to have her with us tonight. Let's give a warm welcome to Attorney Rosell Abenir.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Kumusta ang food na to? Lami ra? So is it okay if I will start my lecture tonight? You can enjoy your food. So actually, as Pastor Kim discussed earlier, the topic is all about legal matters. But actually, the topic is all about tax updates. So why are tax updates a legal matter? Philippine taxation stems from the passage of every law. So there is no tax system that is not patterned before any law is passed. So we will not have any tax law. We will not have any tax system if there is no law supporting it. So that makes it a legal matter. Taxes are legal matters because taxes are supported by laws. With that, transfer siguro. Okay na, sige. With that, we will have our topic for tonight, the ever-changing landscape of tax administration affecting God's people. So good evening once again. My name is Attorney Rosell Abenir. I am a revenue officer at Revenue District Office number 81, Cebu City North. And we will be discussing the recent tax updates, especially on ease of paying taxes, which make reforms that would make payment of taxes more easy and more convenient for our taxpayers. So taxes are the fundamental aspect of any society. They fund the public services we rely on, from healthcare and education to infrastructure. However, the system and policies governing tax administration are constantly evolving, bringing both challenges and opportunities. The Christian perspective, however, on taxation is often noted in the biblical principles of justice, stewardship, and care for the community. According to Christian teachings, taxation is seen as a legitimate way for governments to fund services that promote the common good, such as infrastructure, security, and welfare of the poor. So for tonight's lecture outline, I will be sharing the biblical context on taxation, and then we will have the current updates on Philippine taxation and the impact on these updates to God's people, practical steps or best practices, and we will have our question and answer portion. So a while ago, there was a QR code that was reflected on screen. So if you were able to scan the QR code, you can send your questions and answer so that we can tackle that later. So in Matthew chapter 22, verse 17 to 21, it says, "Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax." They brought him a denarius. And he asked them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" They answered, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "So give back to Caesar's what is Caesar's, and to God what is God." In this scripture, Matthew 22:17 to 21, the Pharisees and Herodians asked Jesus whether it is lawful to pay taxes to the Roman emperor. Attempting to trap him in his response, Jesus asked them to show a coin used for tax and points out the image of Caesar on it. He then tells them, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's," emphasizing the importance of fulfilling civic responsibilities while also honoring spiritual obligations. It goes without saying that if we believe in God, we should be the role models for paying the correct amount of taxes. Next, I will be sharing a biblical text on authorities appointed by God, and it is found in Romans chapter 13, verse 1 to 3. It says, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same." In this Bible text, the Apostle Paul urges believers to submit to governing authorities, as all authority is established by God. He explains that resisting authority is equivalent to resisting God's ordinance, which could lead to judgment. Authorities serve as God's servants to maintain order, and those who do good need not fear them, but rather, they should fear the consequences of doing wrong. Paying taxes is more than just a civic duty for us believers in Christ. It is a spiritual obligation rooted in biblical teachings. So we will now go to the main topic of this lecture, which is the recent updates on taxation. So basically, the ease of paying taxes was passed through Republic Act number 11976, or the Ease of Paying Taxes Act. It is basically a law passed on January 5, 2024, and since we have 15 days for its effectivity, it lapsed into law last January 22, 2024, with the following core objectives. First, to provide a healthy environment for the tax-paying public that protects and safeguards taxpayers' rights and welfare, as well as assures the fair treatment of all taxpayers. Second, to modernize tax administration and improve its efficiency and effectiveness. And third, to update the taxation system and adopt the best practices and replace antiquated procedures. And lastly, to enact policies and procedures which are appropriate to different types of taxpayers. Prior to the passage of this law, RA 11976, we in the Bureau have received numerous or an enormous amount of feedbacks that paying taxes is very difficult, especially that we are already in the modern times where payment is already online, and yet prior to the passage of this, we haven't had any system of accepting payment of taxes online. So it is impertinent that our government would also be adept and would adapt to technological advancements. So that's why RA 11976 was passed. As the name or the title of the law, Ease of Paying Taxes Act, it will be really easy for the taxpayers now to pay their taxes. Unlike before that you have to go through physically over-the-counter banks and submit your returns and pay cash. Nowadays, because of the passage of RA 11976, you can easily use different payment platforms such as GCash, Paymaya, or use Visa or debit card or online banking systems. So nowadays, payment of taxes would be very convenient compared to before. So we have in every law that is passed, there is always an implementing law and regulation. So it is the Bureau of Internal Revenue who makes the implementing law and regulation with the approval of the Department of Finance. So upon the passage of RA 11976, there are a lot of revenue issuances that has been passed to implement this law. One of which is Revenue Regulation number 4-2024. So, this was effective, the law was effective January 22, 2024, but the implementing rule and regulation was passed on April 27, 2024. So, it is pertaining to the manual and electronic filing at your convenience. There's still manual filing, but it is already at your option. So in addition to the manual filing, there is already an option for electronic filing by availing of the different services such as online banking, GCash, Paymaya. You can already pay, and before there is a rule that if you are registered to a particular revenue district office, you're only allowed to pay at that revenue district office. Now, because of the passage of this law, you can now pay anywhere. So even if you are not registered to that particular revenue district office, and then, for example, at the given time, you have a tax which is due today, and let's say you are registered at Cebu City, and then today you are still yet at Manila, you can pay at any agency-accredited banks in Manila without being penalized for wrong venue or wrong payment or wrong submission of taxes. So that's basically one of the best practices that is introduced into this law. Also, we have Revenue Regulation number 8-2024. Under this revenue regulation, taxpayers are now classified according to their annual gross receipts and revenues. So, taxpayers are now branded as micro taxpayers, small taxpayers, medium taxpayers, and large taxpayers. Prior to the passage of this law, there is yet no let's say, there is no definition of how are you going to be classified. But because of the passage of this law, taxpayers there is now a thin line of there is now a basis of classifying taxpayers, whether you are small, micro, large, or medium, by basing on your gross annual receipts or revenues. So how are they being classified now? For taxpayers whose gross sales or receipts annually do not exceed 3 million, they are classified as micro. But for taxpayers whose annual gross receipts and revenues exceed 3 million but not more than 20 million, they are classified as medium taxpayer. So why is this important? This is important because what was also introduced in this law are the implementing rules and regulation pertaining to small and micro taxpayers. There are certain rates which are quite lower compared to those imposed to medium and large taxpayers. So it is important to know what kind of taxpayer are you being classified. So for example, if you're a small and micro taxpayers, there are certain rates quite lower than that of the existing rates that are applicable to you. For example, in the imposition of surcharge, we know that when you are late in filing taxes, you are liable for a 25% surcharge prior to the passage of this law. But if you are classified as a small and medium taxpayer, the rate of surcharge that is applicable to you is not 25, but only 10%. So that is why knowing what is your classification is very important. Because if you know that you are only classified as small or you're only classified as micro, you can insist from the revenue officer that, hey, why are you imposing me this amount of rate? I'm only a micro or I'm only a small taxpayer. I'm entitled to a lower rate. Okay, so we also have Revenue Regulation 7-2024 and Revenue Regulation 11-2024. Basically, these revenue regulations have been passed to what? Inform the taxpayers to change their official receipts from official receipts to invoice. So before, for traders or businessmen engaged in the sale of goods, you are required to issue sales invoice. And for those who are engaged in sale of services, you are required to issue official receipt. But due to this revenue regulation, you are now required to submit invoice, whether service invoice if you are engaged in selling service, or sales invoice if you are engaged in selling goods. So the official receipt, although it is still a valid document for claiming expenses and taxes from January to December 31, 2024. So, starting January 1, 2025, official receipts will now become a secondary source of document. And what becomes your primary source for claiming expenses will now be the invoices. So, those who are still having official receipts, if you still have that in your hands, there was a deadline set by BIR last July 31, 2024 to submit a listing of all your official receipts, the number of the serial numbers and the number of booklets, including the details of your authority to print. So there was a deadline already for the submission. So what are you going to do? You submit a list of all your official receipts to the respective revenue district and then have it received. So, for now, nilapse na si July 31, 2024. So, what happens to those who have not yet submitted a list of their official receipt? They are now required to pay for a penalty, which is only 1,000 pesos for late information. So, you can still submit a list of your existing official receipts, but you will now be paying a penalty. So, again, effective January 1, 2025, official receipts are no longer the primary document which will be the source of claiming expenses. So if you will claim an expense and then your supporting document is an official receipt, it will now be disallowed starting January 2025, because what is now the primary document for claiming expense is the invoice, service invoice or sales invoice. Okay. We have Section 2A of RA number 3-2024, adoption of accrual basis of accounting and recognizing sales for both sale of goods and services. So, what is the relevance of this provision? Prior to the passage of the ease of paying taxes, in the filing of our VAT returns, every taxpayer is encouraged to file their VAT returns according to cash basis accounting. So, there is quite a conflict, because if you file your VAT return, you will use cash basis accounting. And then if you will file your income tax return, you'll base accrual basis accounting. So, especially to us revenue officers, there's a lot of reconciliation. We do reconciliations every now and then, because basically what you declare in your VAT return is not the same with what you declare in your income tax return. So now, because of the passage of the ease of paying taxes, the submission of VAT return and the details that you declare in the VAT return will now be the same with that of the income tax return. Why? Because you will now recognize sales in the declaration of your VAT returns in accrual basis. So, just the same with the income recognition. So, accrual basis accounting. Also, Section 4A of Revenue Regulation 7-2024 on the preservation of books of accounts and accounting records. Prior to the passage of the Ease of Paying Taxes, which requires every taxpayers to preserve their books of accounts for a period of 10 years. Under the EOPT, you are now required to preserve the books of accounts, the physical books of accounts and financial records for at least 5 years. And another 5 years for the electronic copies. So, si electronic copies is for the after 5 years na lang. So, prior to EOPT, it should be 10 years. The physical copy of all your accounting records and financial records should be kept in physical form for at least 10 years. So, now it's only 5 years. Also, for Section 6 of Revenue Regulation Number 4-2024, removal of the requirement the tax to be deducted or withheld from income payments and remitted to the BIR for deductibility of income payments. How are we going to explain this in layman's term? Okay. If you are familiar with letter of authority, who among you has received a letter of authority here? Wala yung naka-familiar? Hi, ma'am. So, electronic letter of authority is actually a letter of authority authorizing every revenue officer to inspect the books of accounts and accounting records of every taxpayer. So, it is our kung sa layman's term pa na mura na siya og search warrant or more siya search warrant nga we hold it with us, authorizing us to open and inspect every financial records and accounting records of businesses. So, in doing our audit, we cannot do it according to our discretion. There must be some degree of authorization given to us. So, you must know that in every audit, this must be supported with a letter of authority. So there is a rule in audit. If a taxpayer fails to withhold the necessary expanded withholding tax in every expense, that amount of expense claimed against its income tax must be denied. So that rule has been abolished by the Ease of Paying Taxes. Now, a taxpayer's failure to withhold expanded withholding tax will not allow the disallowance of its expenses. So even if you fail to withhold the expanded withholding tax, that expense will still be allowed, unlike before. So, nikatawa na si ma'am. Next, we have the Section 4 of Revenue Regulation Number 4-2024, or the removal of civil penalty in case of filing of return at the wrong venue. So as I had said earlier, you can basically pay taxes in any agency accredited banks or by using the online platforms or online banking system. So before, taxpayers are afraid to pay anywhere because of the imposition of civil penalty for wrong venue. If you fail to pay at the agency accredited bank at your respective district, you will be imposed a 25% surcharge for wrong venue. But because of the passage of Ease of Paying Taxes, the penalty for wrong venue is now removed. Okay, also for the as what I had said earlier, it is important to determine if you are a micro or a small taxpayer because lesser rates are imposed upon you, just like Section 3 of RR number 6-2024. For the imposition of civil penalties to small and micro taxpayers, the 25 surcharge is now 10%. And also for the interest in late filing is 12% annually. But if you are classified as a small or a micro taxpayer, interest imposed against you will only be 6% or half of the annual interest rate. And then also, just January 22, 2024, the removal of the payment of annual registration fee, Section 5B of Revenue Regulation 7-2024. Every business taxpayers are no longer required to pay annual registration fee. So, the annual registration fee of 500 pesos, which is due every January 31st of every year, is already removed. And then, changes on the imposition of compromise penalties. Also, the compromise penalty based on Revenue Memorandum Order number 7-2015, which na-table anha, and we will check how much are we going to impose for the compromise penalty. If you are a micro or a small taxpayer, the compromise penalty that will be imposed upon you will only be half of what is indicated in RMO 7-2015. And failure to file certain information return, which is pegged at 1,000 pesos, is now only 500 for small and micro taxpayers. Okay, so those were the updates. We have the practical steps or best practices on how to be updated on tax updates. Number 1, you must be curious. Always stay updated on the latest issued regulations or tax laws. For the legit revenue regulations, you must always visit the official website of the BIR. That is www.bir.gov.ph. Seek professional help. Always seek professional advice from licensed or accredited tax professionals. Transparency. Maintain transparency and honesty in all financial dealings. Remember that our actions should reflect our faith and commitment to ethical principles. Commitment. As faithful servants of God, let us not only consider paying taxes as civic duty. Rather, this must be a commitment of our willingness to follow God's commandments. And collaboration. I will move here. Work together as a community to support each other, share knowledge, resources, and best practices. So with that, I will leave you with this. There's no time for question and answer. No more time for question and answer. But I will share my email address and contact number. If you have any question, you can always send me a message or you can email me. And I would be very glad and happy to answer each of your questions. So I will leave you with this quote from John 15:10-11. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Once again, thank you very much. This is such an opportunity for me to share my knowledge and expertise on taxation, and I would be very glad if you would contact me if you have any concerns or questions in the future.